Beloved daughters of grace, come close. Come with the softness of women who have carried worlds in their hearts, who have stitched families together with nothing but prayer and patience, who have stood in kitchens, hospitals, gravesides, and living rooms, holding the weight of life with trembling hands and still whispering, "It is well." Let me speak to you, woman to woman, spirit to spirit, truth to truth. There is a mystery tucked quietly into the folds of Scripture, a golden thread woven through centuries of faith. It glimmers in the Psalms, it breathes through the prophets, it flows through the Gospels like a sacred river, carrying healing on its surface. It is olive oil, not the bottle sitting on your kitchen shelf, not the ingredient that sizzles in a pan, not the drizzle over a salad. No, this olive oil is older, deeper, holier. It is the oil that carries memory, the oil that carries covenant, the oil that carries God's whisper through the ages. And woman of wisdom, woman of strength, woman who has weathered storms and still stands, you need to hear this. This oil was always meant for you. For the woman whose hair carries silver like a crown of lightning and wisdom. For the woman whose hands have soothed fevered brows, wiped tears, folded laundry, cooked meals, held grandchildren, buried loved ones, survived storms. For the woman who has known loss and yet still knows how to love. The oil speaks your name. From Genesis to Revelation, olive oil is more than a substance. It is a symbol. It is the silent language of heaven. Where there was purpose, there was oil. Where there was calling, there was oil. Where there was healing, there was oil. And beloved, do not forget, where there is you, there is oil. The olive tree itself is a sermon. It grows in harsh winds. It stands in brutal heat. It survives drought after drought and still produces fruit in its old age. It does not give up. It does not break. It does not wither under pressure. If you look closely, you will see yourself in its branches. You too have survived seasons that tried to crush you. You too have borne fruit when life gave you nothing but stones. You too have stood strong when others expected you to fall. And just like the olive, every time you were pressed, something precious came out of you. Wisdom, clarity, compassion, strength. Gold does not shine without fire. Perfume does not release without crushing. And oil does not flow without pressure. Every heartbreak you endured, every betrayal you survived, every night you cried silently so no one would hear you, every prayer whispered into the dark, all of it was pressing, holy pressing, purposeful pressing, not to destroy you, but to draw the oil out of you. You see, God never allowed anything in your life that He did not intend to transform into anointing. Nothing you lived through was wasted, not one tear, not one wound, not one lonely season. And olive oil is heaven's reminder of that truth. When prophets crowned kings, it was oil they poured, not jewels, not titles. When priests entered holy service, it was oil that marked them, not robes, not rituals. When lamps in the tabernacle burned through the night, it was oil that kept them alive, not talent, not beauty. And when the sick were touched by heaven's healing, it was oil that carried the prayer, not medicine alone. Beloved, the oil was never decoration, it was identification. It said, you are chosen, you are covered, you are not ordinary, you are not forgotten, you are set apart. And what God used to anoint kings and priests, He placed in your hands too, not as coincidence, not as tradition, as inheritance. Because the anointing of a woman in her seasoned years is unlike anything else on earth. Younger women shine with possibility, but older women shine with proof. Proof that God is faithful, proof that storms end, proof that healing comes, proof that miracles happen quietly in kitchens, bedrooms, and prayer closets. There is a depth in you that you did not have at 20 or 30, a sacred steadiness that only time can build, a roar of wisdom hiding beneath your silence. And the oil honors that. When you touch that oil to your skin, your temples, your brow, your chest, you are not doing something small. You are doing something ancient, prophetic, powerful. You are reminding your spirit, I am still chosen, I am still needed, I am still anointed. And beloved, this is only the beginning. Because there is a deeper mystery in the olive itself, a truth about pressure, pain, and divine purpose. And it will change the way you see every hardship you've ever lived through. There are moments in a person's life when everything looks normal on the outside, yet deep within, a silent storm begins to rise. A storm no one else can see. A storm that whispers, something is resisting you. Something is watching you. Something is pushing against your destiny. And so it was with Sada Danit Singha. Every night after the shop closed and the last lamp was turned off, his house would sink into a strange stillness. Not the peaceful stillness of midnight, but a tense silence, like the air was waiting for something to happen. The kind of silence that makes your heartbeat sound too loud. He would lie awake on his thin wooden bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to rest. Thoughts moved through him like shadows. Were these just dreams or warnings? Why did he feel a weight around him, as if something invisible sat upon his chest? His ancestors had taught him never to ignore spiritual signs. They said, the spirit realm speaks long before the physical world reacts. If you ignore the whisper, you will be shaken by the shout. And now, the whisper had grown into a presence. For weeks, he fought against what he did not understand. He blamed tiredness, he blamed stress, he blamed long nights. But deep down he knew this was not exhaustion. This was an attack, soft, quiet, patient, but real. Then one cold dawn, as the sky turned from charcoal to pale blue, he experienced the moment that changed everything. As he walked toward the outhouse, barefoot on the dust, he stopped suddenly. Something tugged at his spirit. A strange, sharp awareness, as if unseen eyes were watching him closely. He turned his head slowly toward the ground and froze. There, directly in front of his threshold, lay tiny footprints. Not the footprints of a child, not the footprints of a passerby. These were the footprints of something that did not belong to this world. Three-toed, deep, and facing the wrong direction, as if whatever made them had walked backward toward his door. His heart pounded. He blinked several times, hoping it was an illusion. But the prints remained, carved clearly into the moist earth, like a silent signature left by a visitor he never invited. A cold wave passed through him. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory. Jab koi cheez teri had akar cross kar, samaj leke teri zindagi ki jang shuru ho chuki hai. When something crosses your boundary, know that your life's battle has begun. He felt it. This was a boundary that had been crossed. He stood there for several long seconds, unable to move. The early morning wind brushed the back of his neck, and for the first time, he felt small in front of what he was facing. Not weak, but humbled, confronted, called into a war he never chose. Yet something inside him refused to bow to fear. He straightened his spine. He clenched his fists. He steadied his breath. Every belief he carried, every scripture he memorized, every spiritual teaching he inherited from his elders began to awaken inside him. This was not the time to run. This was not the time to hide. This was the time to rise. With calm determination, he stepped closer. And that is when he noticed something even stranger. The footprints led from the open fields straight toward his home. But they did not lead back. Whatever it was had come in, but it had not gone out. A chill spread across his arms. What kind of creature enters but never leaves? Where did it go? Why was it here? What did it want? He slowly lifted his gaze toward the doorway. Something inside that house had changed. The air itself felt heavier, older, disturbed, but he refused to take a step backward. In that moment, Sada Danit Singha understood a powerful truth of spiritual warfare. The enemy studies the one he fears. If darkness comes looking for you, it is because your destiny threatens it. And instead of collapsing under fear, a quiet fire rose in his chest. He would not allow any shadow to claim the ground God had given him. He would not allow any unclean spirit to walk into his home and rewrite the story of his life. This was his house, his territory, his destiny, and he would defend it. But little did he know, this was only the beginning. Sada Danit Singha barely slept that night. Even though his body lay on the bed, his spirit stood on guard, listening to every sound, every shift of the wind, every whisper that passed through the wooden walls of his home. By the time the sky turned gray, he felt the weight of something unseen pressing around him. Not suffocating, but watchful. Like a presence waiting for him to rise, waiting for him to confront what had come into his territory. As soon as the first bird cried out from the trees, he stepped outside and froze again. The strange footprints were gone, not faded, not blurred, gone. The earth was smooth as if no creature, natural or unnatural, had touched it. It was impossible. Even the softest breeze couldn't erase something that deep. And no human hand could have brushed away marks so perfectly overnight. He knelt down, touched the soil, and felt the truth humming through his fingertips. Something erased the evidence of its own arrival. His chest tightened. This wasn't just spiritual activity. This was intelligence. Something had come into his home, and it did not want to be found. The thought made his skin prickle. He straightened slowly, eyes scanning the ground, the trees, the horizon. The world looked normal, peaceful even, but the quiet now carried a different message. Not the silence of emptiness, but the silence of a hunter waiting in the dark. He walked back inside, and that's when he saw it. At first, it looked like ordinary dust near the corner of his prayer room. But as he bent down and dragged his finger across it, he realized it wasn't dust at all. It was ash, cold, fine, dark ash, each grain glimmering faintly as if it had once been touched by fire. He closed his eyes briefly, trying to steady his breath. His elders had taught him the meaning of ashes left without fire. Jin chizon ko jalaya nahi gaya, lekin fir birag ban kar gir je, samaj lo koi roos jaga guzri hai. If something becomes ash without being burned, know that a spirit has passed through that place. He whispered under his breath, Tu kon hai, aur meri zindagi main kyun aaye hai? Who are you and why have you entered my life? His voice echoed faintly against the wooden walls. Suddenly, a faint, cold wind slipped past him, inside the house where no window was open. His heart pounded. He turned sharply toward the doorway. Nothing, only silence. But the ash on the floor had begun to move, slowly, softly, as if stirred by invisible fingertips. A shiver ran down his spine. He stepped back instinctively, but then stopped himself. Fear would not drive him from his own home. He gathered courage, took a deep breath, and followed the trail of ash. It formed a subtle line across the room and led him to the old wooden cabinet where he kept his scriptures, oils, and ancestral writings. The cabinet door was slightly open. He was certain, absolutely certain, that he had closed it the night before. A sinking realization washed over him. It hadn't just entered his home, it had entered his sacred space, his place of prayer, his place of power. He reached out with slow, steady hands and opened the cabinet fully. Inside, nothing seemed disturbed, except one thing, a single page from his grandfather's ancient prayer manuscript was lying on the floor of the cabinet, torn cleanly from the book, not ripped violently, not damaged by accident, removed intentionally. He lifted the page with trembling fingers. His eyes widened as he recognized the writing. It was a prayer of exposure, a spiritual declaration used to reveal hidden enemies, unmask dark forces, and break the invisibility of spirits that operate in secrecy. Of all the pages, why this one? A chill spread across his skin. Something inside that house didn't want to stay hidden anymore. It wanted to be seen. It wanted him to know it had arrived. It wanted him to face it. Because the battle was no longer about footprints or ash or open doors. It was a battle of wills, a confrontation of spiritual authority, a challenge thrown directly at his destiny. He folded the page carefully, placed it on his prayer mat, and whispered, Main Baganahi, Main Laranga. I will not run, I will fight. And the moment he said it, the air around him shifted. The atmosphere tightened like a rope being pulled, and a faint, almost inaudible sound echoed across the room. A soft breath, a whisper, a presence acknowledging him. The visitor was still there. It had not left. It had simply stepped back into the shadows, waiting for him to take the next step, because the real encounter, the true confrontation, was yet to come. By the time the sun began its slow descent behind the fields, Sada Danit Singha felt the weight of the entire day lingering around him. He had spent hours reading, praying, pacing, and trying to understand the meaning behind the ash, the missing footprints, and the torn manuscript page. But as evening settled in, something else began to stir. The atmosphere shifted, subtle at first, like a faint vibration in the air. The trees outside stopped swaying. The birds fell silent. Even the insects, usually buzzing loudly at dusk, seemed to pause, as if nature itself was waiting for what was about to happen. Sada stood at the doorway, watching the colors of the sky fade from gold to orange to the deep red of approaching darkness. A strange thought passed through him. Today, the darkness is not arriving alone. He stepped back into his house and shut the door. The moment the latch clicked, a deep stillness fell across the room. Thick, heavy, unnatural. His heart tightened. He had felt this kind of presence only once in his childhood, when a wandering spirit had attacked their livestock. His grandmother had said, "Jis rat hoa rukjay, samaj lokoi cheez chalkara rahi hai." When the night air stops moving, know that something is walking toward you. Tonight, the air was not merely still, it was listening. He lit a small oil lamp, its flame trembling as if aware of what approached. The faint glow cast long shadows across the walls, stretching them into strange, shifting shapes. Then, he heard it, a soft tapping. One tap, another tap, slow, rhythmic, deliberate. Not at the door, not on the window, but inside the house. Tap, tap, tap. Sada's breath caught in his throat. Every instinct screamed at him to step back, but his faith pulled him forward. He followed the sound through the hallway, past the kitchen, into the prayer room. The lamp in his hand flickered violently as he entered. There, at the far end of the room, stood his old wooden chair. The same chair his grandfather once used for prayer. Nothing unusual, except for one detail. The chair was moving, not sliding, not rocking naturally, tapping. One of its legs lifted slightly and tapped the floor again. Tap, as if someone invisible sat on it, shifting their weight, letting him know they were there. His throat dried. His fingers trembled around the lamp, but he refused to step back. He placed the lamp on the floor, knelt slowly and whispered, "Apna ap zahir ka, reveal yourself." The room exhaled, a long, low, unnatural sigh. The temperature dropped so suddenly that his breath became visible. The flame in the lamp shrank to a tiny blue ember. Shadows thickened, gathering in the corners. And then, the chair stopped tapping. Silence. A silence so deep it pushed into his bones. Suddenly, the ash he had found earlier, now collected in a small bowl, began to tremble. The grains lifted slightly as if pulled by an unseen force. He watched, frozen, as the ash rose slowly into the air, swirling, spinning, forming the faint outline of something, a shape, a presence, a figure. It wasn't human, it wasn't animal, it was something in between. A silhouette made of smoke and memory, with eyes that were not eyes at all, but voids of endless black. The figure leaned slightly toward him, and then, as clearly as if someone whispered beside his ear, he heard his name spoken, not out loud, but inside his mind, Sada. He stiffened. Only one truth existed in the spiritual world. A spirit that knows your name has studied you long before it appeared. His pulse thundered, but he refused to show fear. He lifted the torn manuscript page, the prayer of exposure, and held it firmly. The shadow figure recoiled slightly, as if the ancient words carried a weight even it feared. He began reciting the prayer in a slow, steady voice. With each line he spoke, the room shifted, the shadows twisted, the figure flickered, the walls moaned softly like an old creature awakening. Halfway through the prayer, the spirit lunged forward, not physically, but through the air. A gust of icy wind slamming into him, knocking him backward onto the floor. The lamp extinguished, darkness swallowed the room. For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He felt the cold grip of something around his shoulders. Not heavy, but oppressive. as if the spirit was trying to push fear inside him, force it down into his soul. But then he remembered his grandfather's words. Andera tabjita hijab tu use apne anda jagada. Darkness wins only when you give it a place inside you. He clenched the manuscript page against his chest, gathered his strength, and shouted the final words of the prayer. A burst of force rippled through the room. The spirit shrieked, a sound without sound, and the shadows snapped back like elastic. The presence vanished. The air warmed. The house breathed again. Sada lay on the floor, panting, trembling, but unbroken. He whispered into the quiet, You chose to come for me, but I'm not the one who will fall. But the battle was far from over, because now that the spirit had revealed itself, it was no longer hiding, it was preparing. And the next attack would not be from the shadows, but from a human being carrying the spirit's mark. The night felt longer than any Sada had ever lived through. After the shadow retreated and the house slowly returned to normal, he sat on the floor for almost an hour, breathing hard, feeling the tremor of what had just happened. But spiritual battles rarely end with the first blow, and Sada knew, if a spirit has shown itself, it means its earthly doorway is close. As dawn approached, a faint gray light slipped through the window, and the world outside began to wake. The birds resumed their calls, the trees rustled with the morning breeze. It almost felt like the night had been a dream. Until Sada stepped outside. There, just beyond the threshold of his home, lay something small. A red thread. Thin, frayed, but intentionally placed. He bent down and picked it up. His breath tightened. He knew exactly what it was. A binding thread. A ritualistic object used only by someone trying to tie a person's destiny, weaken their spirit, or mark them for spiritual attack. This wasn't random. This wasn't accidental. Someone had been at his home, and that someone knew exactly what they were doing. His mind raced. Who would want to harm him? He had lived peacefully, helped people, ran his small shop, and kept to himself. But envy, jealousy, bitterness sometimes slept quietly in the hearts of those closest, until the right darkness awakened it. He placed the thread in his pocket and walked to the boundary of his property. The wet earth revealed the faint imprint of ordinary footprints, not spiritual this time, but human. Fresh, leading away from his house, his jaw tightened. Someone had come during the night, someone who brought the spirit, invited it, or guided it. Every spiritual force requires a legal doorway. And now, Sada saw the evidence with his own eyes. He followed the trail for a short distance until the footprints dissolved into the gravel road. He stopped, thinking deeply. Only 3 people lived close enough to approach his home unnoticed. Gopal, the farmer who often asked for help with his debts. Ramesh, his old childhood friend who sometimes battled with envy. Kazari, a traveling priest who had arrived in the village a month ago. Kazari, his posture stiffened. The man had always felt out of place. Too quiet, too observant, too curious about Sada's prayers and his family's spiritual legacy. And recently Sada had caught him staring, long cold stares that lingered too long, as if measuring him. He turned and walked back to the house, deep in thought. As he entered his prayer room again, he saw something he had missed earlier. On the edge of the wooden chair was a faint smear, dark, oily, nearly invisible unless the light struck it just right. He touched it and recognized the scent at once, camphor mixed with crushed neem leaves. Kazari used that blend every time he performed rituals. His chest tightened, pieces of the puzzle snapped into place. The spirit, the footprints erased, the torn manuscript page, the red binding thread outside his home. None of this was happening randomly. A human hand was guiding the darkness, and that human hand belonged to someone who understood this spiritual realm well enough to open a doorway and cruel enough to target Sada directly. But the question still echoed sharply. Why him? Why now? He sat on the floor and closed his eyes, calling on every piece of wisdom his elders had taught him. Sometimes darkness doesn't attack you because of your weakness. but because of your strength, your purpose, your potential, your inheritance. And Sadar had inherited powerful spiritual authority from his grandfather, a legacy that intimidated not just spirits, but people who sought control. A sudden knock cut through his thoughts, not a soft, polite knock, a firm, urgent one. Sadar rose to his feet, heart steady though the situation demanded caution. He approached the door, opened it, and his breath caught. Standing on his doorstep was Gopal the farmer, sweaty, shaking, eyes wide with fear. Bhai, mujhe tujhe zaruri baat karni hai, he stammered. Brother, I need to tell you something important. Sadar stepped aside to let him enter. Gopal hesitated, peering nervously into the corners of the room as if expecting something to leap at him. Teri zindagi khatre mein hai, he whispered. Your life is in danger. Sadar's voice remained calm. Kiski wajah se? Because of whom? Gopal swallowed hard, his lips trembled, and then he said the name, a name Sadar already feared he would hear. Kazari. Sadar felt the confirmation hit his chest like a weight. Gopal continued, voice cracking. Main you say kal rateriga ki taraf jate deka. Aur uske hath mein wo hilal dahaga tha. I saw him walking toward your house last night, and in his hand was that same red thread. Sadar's heart went still. The thread, the ritual, the spirit, everything was connected. Gopal added in a broken whisper, Wo keta tha, ketera wa katam honai wala hai. He said, your time is about to end. Sadar felt neither fear nor anger, only clarity. If a man and a spirit had joined hands, then this battle had entered a new phase, and the next move would decide everything. The morning sun rose with a strange heaviness, as though the world itself understood that this day carried weight, a day of reckoning, a day where hidden things would come into the light. Sadar Danit Singha wrapped the torn manuscript page carefully and placed it inside his shirt. He did not carry weapons. He did not carry oil. He did not carry charms. He carried truth. Truth is enough when darkness is built on lies. Gopal, still trembling, tried to speak again, but Sadar raised a hand gently. Jos bat honithi, wo ho chuki, he said quietly. What needed to be revealed has been revealed. Fear spread across Gopal's face. Kya tu akela jega? Will you go alone? Sadar nodded. This battle started with me. It will end with me. He stepped outside. The morning air felt unnaturally warm, almost too still, as if the spirit sensed what he was about to do. The trees were motionless. No birds flew overhead. Even the dogs in the distance, who always barked at dawn, were silent. Silence is not always peace. Sometimes silence is a warning. Sadar walked the dusty path leading to the abandoned brick shed where Kazari often performed his rituals. With each step, the air grew thicker, denser, like an invisible fog clinging to his skin. When he reached the shed, he found the door slightly open. Not pushed, not forced, simply left ajar, inviting. He pushed it open fully. Inside, the dim room smelled of camphor, burnt herbs, and stale incense. Strange symbols coated the walls, drawn in ash and oil. A small lamp flickered in the corner, casting long shadows, and sitting in the center, legs crossed, eyes half closed, was Kazari. But this was not the calm, wandering priest the villagers saw. This Kazari looked hollow. His eyes were sunken, his skin pale, his breath slow and uneven, as though something inside him was draining his life force. Without lifting his head, Kazari whispered, "So you came." Sadar stepped inside calmly. "To Miergat Kyunayatha? Why did you come to my home?" Kazari lifted his face slowly. His eyes were not normal. Deep blackness swirled inside them, not like darkness, but like something living, something watching through him. For a moment, it wasn't Kazari who spoke, but something riding on his consciousness. "Because your bloodline carries a voice we fear," the spirit hissed through him. "Your grandfather closed the gates we opened. You were chosen to finish what he ended." Sadar's jaw tightened. So this wasn't about him being weak. This was about him being dangerous. His lineage carried the authority to break spiritual doors, and darkness had come to silence him. Khazari's voice shook violently as he continued. I didn't want this, but they promised me power. They promised me influence. They said if I opened the way, they would give me everything I had lost. Tears began slipping down the man's face. I didn't know it would come for you. Sada took a slow breath. People often invite darkness thinking it will serve them. But darkness serves no one. It uses, it drains, it destroys. Sada stepped forward, his voice steady. What you did was wrong, but you can still be saved. The spirit inside Khazari let out a low growl. He belongs to us. Sada pulled out the torn manuscript page, the prayer of exposure, the symbol of authority from his lineage. The same page the spirit had tried to remove. The shadows on the walls began to tremble. Khazari clutched his head, screaming as the spirit resisted, twisting his face into unnatural expressions. Don't read it, don't read it. But Sada had already started. He recited the ancient words with fire in his voice, not loud, but powerful, steady, certain. Every line struck the air like a blade. Every sentence pushed against the darkness inside Khazari. The spirit shrieked, a sound that made the room vibrate. The lamp's flame shot upward violently. The symbols on the walls began to peel away as if erased by invisible hands. Khazari convulsed, body shaking, tears streaming down his face. Please, help me, he whispered in his own voice for the first time. Sada knelt beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. With the final words of the prayer, a blast of unseen force ripped through the room. The shadows snapped backward. A roar filled the air, furious, defeated, fading, and then silence, real silence. Khazari collapsed, unconscious, but breathing normally. Color slowly returned to his face. His eyes fluttered open, normal, human, relieved. It's gone, he whispered. Sada nodded, and then he looked up at the empty air above them. He could still feel it, the aftertaste of darkness, not present, but watching from a distance. Because battles don't end in a single victory. Some battles require vigilance for a lifetime, but Sada had won the most important one, the battle for his home, his destiny, and his lineage. He stood, breathing deeply, feeling the atmosphere shift back into peace. The gate had been closed, the spirit had been exposed, and the man who opened the door had been freed, but far away, in a place beyond human sight. A pair of unseen eyes watched him with new awareness, because now the darkness knew his strength, and the spiritual world had marked him as a man not to be taken lightly.